Here's a brief discussion of a while loop. What you're looking at is a compound statement called a while. It's yet another structure that allows us to control flow. We saw with if and elif and else that we could execute statements selectively. But what while allows us to do is execute statements repeatedly. So I want you to look closely at what happens when we run this while loop. And we put in a couple of statements to show the beginning and the ending. Of course, you can see where the while loop begins and ends. It starts on line 3 and it ends on line 9. Of course, this means that line 11 is not part of the while loop. Now, what we're going to see is that the while block will execute repeatedly over and over and over again until the test on line 6 is met. Why don't we read it before executing it? We start on line 1 with the print statement starting, and then we say while true. Basically, while true means loop this block repeatedly. And by loop, I mean execute the block over and over and over again. I should say loop through. Loop through this block repeatedly, over and over and over again. Now, what's going to happen is the statements inside the while block are going to execute. We'll see a print statement. We'll take user input. We'll check the user input to see if it's a queue. If it's not a queue, we're going to do continuing, print continuing, and then something invisible happens. At the end of any while block, there is an invisible statement, basically, that says loop back to the top, loop back up to line 3. So if we were to run this, and if our input was never Q, this loop would loop endlessly. Let me demo. Enter Q to quit. I'll enter W, A, Z, 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 hello, my goodness, etc. You see that every time I type something that's not a Q, it prints continuing. Then we see top of loop. Look at this very closely. You see how we're seeing continually. Where do you see that in the code? Line 9. Then directly after continuing, what do you see? Top of loop. Where is that? Line 4. In other words, Python went from line 9 to line 4. Actually went up to line 3 and saw the true again, and then went to line 4. So as you can see on line 10, that comment is indicating what's actually happening. When Python's execution reaches the end of a loop, it's going to return to the top of the loop. The only thing that can stop it in this particular while true loop is a break statement. Now look on line 8. As you can see, there's a statement there called break. And what break does is take us out of the loop. Now, I put the break statement after an if statement because I want to loop repeatedly until I tell the loop to stop. The way I'm going to tell the loop to stop is by typing Q at the input prompt. So if I type Q, as I'm doing right here, it quits. We see quitting, and then we see ending. Let's look at those statements. I typed Q to quit, and then it says quitting and ending. So this test became true. Quitting was printed. Then where do we go? To break, and then ending. So you can see that after line 8, we jumped directly to line 12. That's because the break statement takes us out of any loop that we're in and immediately drops us down below the while loop. Now let's talk about what this is for. The while loop is for situations in which you don't know how many times you want to do something, but you will know when it's time to stop doing it. We'll have to see some examples, but in the homework, if we look at the homework, we will see that one of the assignments is to create a loop that asks questions of the user over and over and over again. See all that repeating data? Your guess, cue to quit. Your guess is lower. Your guess, cue to quit. Your guess is lower. Here's what this program is about. The computer program, the one you write, is going to choose a random number between 1 and 100, and you, the user of the program, is expected to guess it. When you type, let's say, 50, the program will tell you whether your guess is higher or lower than the number that the computer is thinking of. You can then guess again and lower, guess again, and it says it's higher. And then if you finally do guess it, the program will stop. It'll stop looping. So this is an example of a program that would need to do the same thing over and over and over again until it's told to stop, or until some sort of condition is reached. If you look at this program, it's not doing much more than just asking you to type Q. And if you do type Q, it will leave, it will exit. If you don't type Q, it'll keep looping. And that's exactly how it works. Let's look at it again. Enter Q to quit, A, Q to quit, B, Q to quit, C, Q to quit, D. As you can see, every time I type something, it says continuing, there's line 9, top of loop, there's line 4, and then asks me again, enter Q to quit. When I don't type Q, of course, it's going from line 5 to line 9 and then back to line 4. So if this test is not true, it's going to jump directly to line 9 and then up to line 4. And then asking me again. So this is actually going to be the basis for this homework assignment. The idea is that the program is going to begin by choosing a random number between 1 and 100, and then you've got to guess it. Fortunately, the program gives you hints as to whether you're on the right track. Did you guess lower or higher than the number that the computer program is thinking of? As it turned out, the number was 81. Rather than having to do a random guess, we're given clues until we can finally get to the right answer. Obviously, this endless loop, which is going to go on arbitrarily, right, doing the same thing over and over and over again, is going to need to have an if statement in there somewhere with a break statement. And as you can see, that's what we have here. If the input is quit or Q, then it will break out. In our homework, looks like that's a possibility. If you do type quit, it should break out. But more importantly, if you type the correct answer, it will break out. Not only that, it'll even tell you how many times you guessed. So this is what a while loop is and how a while loop works. We don't often need it, but we need it often enough that we should at least be able to code one up. Create a loop that will eventually stop looping.